Hello, welcome to today's webinar entitled Open Educational Resources as Equity-Centered Change for Teaching and Learning at Illinois Community Colleges. My name is Nina Owolabi, and I'm a doctoral candidate at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, as well as a research assistant with the Office of Community College Research and Leadership. I'm joined today by my colleague, and I will allow her to introduce herself.
Thank you, Nina. Hi, everyone. My name is Aidana Sirgebayeva. I'm a PhD student at the University of Illinois as well, and I'm a research assistant with the Office of Community College Research and Leadership. And especially, I'm within this project, Open Educational Resources. Thank you, Nina.
Awesome. Thank you, Aidana. We are so excited to be able to share this research that has literally been years in the making, really focused on OER as supportive to equity goals. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So our agenda for today, we'll obviously walk through a very brief introduction, give a little bit of context to this project and how it came to be. We'll then discuss the study goals, followed by the theoretical framework, a bit about the methodology, and then we'll take some time to discuss out our findings, how this is significant, right, to the work that's being done, and then we will wrap with implications as well as an opportunity to connect further with our OER work through OCCRL. And so open educational resources, or OER, are teaching, learning, and research materials that are available under an open source or license agreement that really allows for sharing, accessing, or repurposing materials for faculty and student needs. And since 2002, researchers have really found that open educational resources can open up low-cost access to educational materials really worldwide and ease financial expenses for college students in particular. And over the last 20 years or so, we have seen OER use really become ubiquitous around the world, and particularly supportive to community colleges in the United States, where some of the most underserved students are concentrated, and the use of low-cost materials are especially needed. Seeing this increased use and discussion of OER in the community college space, OCCRL really began that work to understand how it's being used in the Illinois context. And so in 2020, we published a landscape scan and noted that OER could be particularly supportive to improving equity goals for community colleges in Illinois, but more analysis ultimately was needed, particularly in understanding how certain minoritized populations could benefit from OER. And so building off of that work, we continued with our current study, centering the voices of librarians and participants closely aligned with OER work at their campuses. And so our study really aimed to expand upon that initial environmental scan. And as I mentioned, really centering those librarian voices to help us really understand what that process has looked like. And so now I'll pass it on to my colleague to help us understand the research questions that bubbled up from this work.
Thank you, Nina. So within this project, we have two main research questions that are: how have institutions defined equity, and what connection do they see within the open educational resources in their campuses? The second research question is: how are the community colleges elevating OER to support access to affordable campus materials and work to decolonize curriculums? So we draw from the American Association of Colleges and Universities definition of equity as creation of opportunities for historical underserved populations to have equal access to and participate in educational programs that are capable of closing the achievement gaps in student success and completion. This is the term we are conceptualizing while looking for the equity within the OER. And we have chosen a specific theoretical framework, which we think best describes the implementation of OER within the community colleges in Illinois. There is a diffusion of innovation theory by Rogers. There has been a couple of editions of this book where he have characterized the implementation of any innovations. In our case, we use the implementation of OER within the community colleges, how different population of innovators or just people have used it, implemented, adapted, or adopted to specific needs. So basically, Rogers defined 5 categories of innovators. First one, very small percent, as you can see, 2 to 5% are innovators, those who have been introduced to innovation and just adopted it, implemented it immediately. The second one is 13.5% of people, a little bit more, but still not the majority. Early adopters, those who have seen that innovators have used the new innovation and see the success, and thus decided to rather implement the innovation and try it rather not to try it. And then we have the chasm. The rest of the 3 categories, early majority, late majority, and laggards, are the majority of the people who usually do not tend to move quickly while they see the innovations. And this chasm characterizes the concept that there should be a time that should be spent before innovation is introduced, and people should try and test it and see whether that innovation actually impacts to the success of any activity or process. So early majority, 34%, are the people who have seen the success and they need an evidence of the success of the innovation in order to implement it within their own units or places or community colleges in our cases. And we have late majority, those who have seen the success and not really success, and also have seen different variation of how innovations do usually work and diffuse within the space and time. And we have the 16% of these 5 categories, which is called in the theory as laggards, those people who still tend not to use it or tend not to try even to use the new innovation that have been introduced, although it have been proven to be successful, impacting to the overall success of the program, but still those 16% have been called as the laggards who have not even tried to adapt to the new innovations. And within these 5 categories, and also we'll talk about the data collection and what we have seen within the community colleges, we have pretty observed categories of people within the community colleges who might fall into some of these 5 categories. Thank you. So the main methodology of our research project is qualitative approach. And we have used 2 instruments. It's a survey and individual interviews. Semi-structured interviews consisted of 8 main topic areas with additional follow-up questions. Interviews were conducted via Zoom last summer and recorded in audio and video formats. Each interview was transcribed for accuracy. Responses to whether institutions promoted OER awareness to students were threefold. Most of the responses disagreed, some agreed, and the rest were unsure of this policy, as you can see from this colorful figure. The same is seen with the student support services awareness about OER. 80% of the participants responded that these services either are not aware of or have never heard about OER within their institutions. From the survey, we have concluded that many Illinois community colleges are in the initial stages of OER implementation. And here in the table, you can see the participants, those who have participated in our interviews, one-to-one interviews within participants. All these 6 participants have represented different community colleges within the Illinois state. 4 of them were suburban geographical location, 1 rural and 1 urban. Most of the people we have talked to were librarians in the name of their positions, or the job functions were related to be a librarian. But only one person we have talked to was faculty librarian person in the position that which have in the name that the faculty has the primary work or job duty as a teaching faculty member within the college, and the secondarily he was the OER promoter or initiator or implementer within their community colleges. And we would like to present the findings, preliminary findings of our study here, and we have identified 3 of them that we would like worth to mention. The first one is the varying degrees of OER adoption that we have observed within the community colleges. Institutions that have a wide rate of adoption among faculty also seem to be the most comfortable acknowledging how their institutions approach equity issues as related to special populations of students. We defined special populations as Black, Indigenous, students of color, parenting students, first-generation students, former foster youth, low-income students, transfer students, and students with disabilities. These institutions could be categorized as innovators and early adopters by Rogers' theory. Multiple librarians, particularly at the innovator and early adopter institutions, talked about training or facilitated discussions about issues related to equity, including open practices, decolonization of the curriculum, and cultural responsive pedagogy. These institutions also had dedicated positions for helping faculty to develop OER, as well as institutionalized funds available to provide grants and other incentives to faculty engaging OER, benefiting from more capacity to fully support teaching and learning through OER. Institutions only now beginning to engage OER more intentionally were less keen to speak to the ways it could be supportive to a myriad of special populations, which makes sense to a certain degree because so much focus was on the mechanism of even getting programming off the ground. And I would like to hand the floor to Nina.
Thank you. Yeah, and something else that we noticed just in our interviews and in our analysis was that faculty attitude was an especially important driver for successful OER adoption. So faculty primarily, they drive the content assessment for potential bias, representation, and the like, with librarians frequently serving as support. And so while this arrangement certainly seems common among institutions, we found it could also be limiting if faculty are not equipped or encouraged to prioritize those discussions of diversity, equity, or inclusion within OER's materials. And we know in today's kind of volatile and combative environment against DEI initiatives, it is not a given that all community college faculty, particularly where adjunct faculty are dependent upon to really support the teaching load, are even in a position to do that kind of work consistently. So just as an example, a librarian at one urban institution highlighted that while there have been specific faculty who have created training materials for decolonizing the curriculum using OER, conversations are only kind of happening informally, right? Another librarian at a suburban institution said few faculty were engaging these issues at all. And which highlights another missed opportunity that by relying solely on faculty, right, to evaluate content for bias and potential harm with some library support, institutions are rarely involving students in evaluating that content. And this is a space where students could really be a particular supportive driver. We also found that though OER can be this really individualized experience for faculty, administrative influences also significantly impact how OER is discussed concerning equity. When asked how frequently leadership actually discuss OER as part of an equity initiative to support special populations, our survey participants on average said rarely to occasionally. Where it happened, sometimes there was a concern about the full grasp of open education's potential. At one institution that had seen its OER work really grow organically, noted that its leadership seemed quick to accept OER as an equity initiative, pushing for significant usage, but really could not the leadership could not articulate beyond cost what that meant for its students. So while the support of OER programming was there, even resulting in a dedicated position to supporting OER as well as some funding, there was also concern about just that lack of understanding, but still a subsequent push that could be a turnoff for some faculty and ultimately hurt the ability to see greater adoption. One interviewee also highlighted how the political and ideological orientation of their campus plays a role in how faculty are engaging OER. So, a result of a more conservative orientation has meant that there are few opportunities to engage faculty in kind of those larger conversations about equitable pedagogy. And the orientation of the campus and a seemingly prevailing deficit view of students, as in, I did this in school. Why can't these students, right? Makes a rather hostile space for OER to be broadly adopted on campus. And the same orientation might also influence relationships with key partners. So almost all the participants highlighted relationships with bookstore management to push OER use forward. And some institutions were able to collect data from their bookstores or with develop an at cost option for classes that were working from only OER materials. So, developing an at cost print option that students could also refer to. But so strong collaboration with the bookstores, however, was not necessarily guaranteed. Institutions that had significant buy-in from administration seemed to be able to overcome those possible kind of tenuous political battles with bookstore management. Institutions with supportive administration were able also to actually provide carrots that were needed to encourage that widespread use, which ultimately could open doors for deeper engagement of OER, which could be supportive to equity goals. And so, as we think about really the significance of the study, right? One clear thing that really bubbled up for us was how different every institution defined equity. And so we really found that institutions need to be a bit more salient in what equity means, what they're talking about, which populations are really expected to be supported through these types of initiatives, through kind of centering and utilizing OER. And I'll
And the
hand it
second
over to Aidana to speak through the rest.
Thank you, Nina. And the second significance we would like to highlight in this presentation that apart from like overall definition of equity within the institutions, we'd like institutions, to consider what equity means related to OER, because most of the studies that have been in the literature currently talks about OER being more of affordability rather than equity initiative, and how institutions see and conceptualize and use it actually OER within their campuses as equity initiative. That's also one of the significance of our study. And finally, we think like study findings of these projects as possible opportunities at multiple stages of institutional implementation, because we have seen different levels of adoptions of OER within the community colleges within one state, Illinois, although information and access to the information was spread pretty in the same time simultaneously, but the adoption rate is quite different. So we think this is one of the significance of our study. And moving to the implications, we would like to highlight two levels because of the adoption of OER within the community colleges, initiator and established level. So the initiator level is best positioned to incorporate elements of open praxis by collaborating with key stakeholders who can support the work of faculty trying to implement OER. So either they can start from the ground up, connecting with students, any remaining DEI-focused committees, bookstores, and administrations. As Nina have highlighted, the different stakeholders within the community colleges play a huge and important role of implementing any initiative within the campuses. So working and balancing with different stakeholders plays an important role in the OER adoption as well. And versus having to backtrack, early collaboration can also help to avoid implementation pitfalls like lack of faculty members or administrative buy-ins and strengthening the program.
Yes, and so we talked about the initiator level, but we also found that even among programs that have an established OER program, that there's still really great opportunity for these programs as well. Specifically, building checks within a diverse group of stakeholders, really beyond the same players who are associated with OER, including student leaders, right? And including student support staff, because these are kind of untapped populations who really could be supportive to OER adoption. And they're also going to help provide just a alternative vantage point of how OER use can continue to evolve, how it can continue to innovate. And so there really is great opportunity to specifically engage students intentionally and in meaningful ways as the OER movement really shifts to centering open education, not just the resources. They're finding that open education could be supportive of decolonizing materials, and students with their particular perspectives ultimately can be a voice that helps to help us better understand, right, the ways that we can really decrease harm to students as well. Moving on to the limitations of our study.
Thank you. So we'd like to acknowledge that there are limitations of our study. The first one is the use of only two data collection instruments, which is the survey and interviews. Using different types of survey or multiple varieties of survey could have strengthened our study. So this is one of the limitations we would like to highlight. And second is the number and demography of participants. We have only 6 participants for the survey and 28 for, 6 participants for the interview and 28 for this survey. Probably having more number of participants among the 48 community colleges in Illinois could have strengthened our study. And demography of the participants also look like similar because we have majority 5 out of 6 are librarians. Their main work is related to OER and library. So probably having variety of participants and their roles within the community college could have also impacted our study. And finally, we have included only the viewpoints of the staff, which we foresee the OER faculty and OER librarians, not including other stakeholders like students, how have been their experiences using the OER materials impacted their study or overall experience within the community colleges, or other faculty members who have not used OER or have used OER and seeing the impact in their own work. And also we have not included administrators' viewpoints in our study. So these are some of the limitations we would like to highlight and acknowledge within our study.
And so, as we wrap our time today, we certainly invite you to visit our OER page, where we have a number of interviews that we've done previously, podcast episodes, blog pieces, just really thinking through what is OER and how can it really be supportive to work that's happening within the Illinois community colleges? And so feel free to take a look at that. And we're excited to be able to and keep checking back because we're excited to be featuring some prominent players within the field very soon, some upcoming content. So we hope that you will certainly check out this page for additional resources. And we've also shared some references. So we, once again, hope that you will be able to engage some of these as you're either thinking about for your own institution, what OER work could look like, or this is something that you're hoping to share with others. So again, thank you so much for spending some time with us to hear a bit about our study. And, we certainly welcome uh, any sort of comments. If there are additional questions or ways that OCCRL can support the work that you are doing, please do not hesitate to email the research team, and we will see what comes from there. Again, thank you all so much for your time and have a great day.
Thank you.